Before I start, I would like you to take a moment to think about these 3 questions. What did you want to be when you were growing up? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And what would you do if you had a year off? Don't worry, you're not going to have to share your answers with anyone, but if you'd like to tell me them later, I'd be very grateful. My name is Toby Lloyd, and I'm an artist based in the UK and currently undertaking a PhD at Newcastle University. I have been using participatory art projects to carry out my research, which explores public attitudes to work, paid and unpaid, how free time is valued, and if a basic income could enable us to become more active citizens. Today I'm going to talk about how participatory art projects can be used as an alternative method for communicating the idea of basic income to members of the public. I'll be using my project Between Eating and Sleeping as an example. From my experience, talking to people about basic income for the first time can be difficult, especially if they are approached unsolicited. Describing what it is, who will receive it, and how it will be funded can sound bureaucratic and become overcomplicated. If an ideological objection is raised, like why should we give free money to people who don't deserve it, or it would make everyone lazy, it can be difficult to move past this point. Even if they support the idea in principle but think it sounds utopian, it can be disregarded as impossible to achieve. In these cases, the outcome is that the discussion becomes a binary win or lose debate, and all nuance gets lost. Once someone has formed an opinion, it is very difficult to change their mind, no matter how much evidence you have. Here are the findings of the recent basic income experiment in Finland. Even though they show positive results, the information is difficult to read and process, which makes them unconvincing. Statistics can seem abstract when compared to stories and anecdotes, which can be related to our own life experiences, which makes them so effective. Narratives help to form our beliefs, which we will then pass on to others when discussing the subject. George Monbiot highlights the power of narratives in his book, Out of the Wreckage, where he cites the work of George Marshall, who states that people may hold information in the form of data and figures, but their beliefs about it are held entirely in the form of stories. Monbiot goes on to say that stories, even if they are partly or completely fictitious, can also strengthen confirmation bias as they resonate so powerfully with our beliefs that attempts to disprove them tend only to reinforce them. Having to defend our beliefs will mean that they become even more entrenched, especially when posed in opposition to those who disagree with us. This can even be said of those who support basic income. When Saraf Devala, head of the Basic Income Network in India, was asked what results from an experiment could convince him that basic income was a bad idea, he replied, "Nothing, and I don't want to think about it." Instead of trying to convince someone that basic income is a good idea, I believe it is better to let them make their own decision. But to do this, we need to be able to relay the information to them in a way that is not dogmatic. This is where art can play a role. I have been using participatory art projects to create spaces that can engage members of the public outside of the political arena to start conversations about basic income without the need to win a debate. An example of this is Between Eating and Sleeping, which poses the 3 questions I showed you at the start of this presentation. They are designed to place the reader in the past, the present, and a speculative future. They are intentionally open to interpretation, so everyone should be able to form an answer to them. This is the exhibition format, which took place in an empty shopfront on a busy high street. I deliberately did not use an art gallery, as I am aware that art, like politics, can be a barrier. Members of the public were invited to come into the space, write their responses on post-it notes, and stick them up next to the corresponding question. The audience was self-selecting. Not everyone would come into the space the first time they walked past, but lots of people looked through the windows, and their curiosity grew over the course of the exhibition. During this time, I was in the space painting the questions onto the walls. This is so I could be present to talk to people when they entered the space, and would be more approachable than if I was sat in a room with a clipboard and questionnaire. Over the course of the exhibition, I recorded the amount of time I worked on the paintings, and using the UK government's minimum wage, which is currently £8.21 an hour, I was able to calculate the value of my labour or how much the paintings were worth. For this exhibition, I worked for 23.5 hours, which equates to £195.51. I used these figures to start conversations with visitors about how they valued time. If they had 23.5 hours, or £195.51, how would they spend it? Would they rather have the time or the money? I find it frustrating that the first question someone will ask you after they've been introduced to you is undoubtedly, what do you do? From my experience, the least interesting thing about someone is their job title. One person I spoke to during the project was a researcher 3 days a week, but the rest of their time was spent being a mother of two, a drummer in a heavy metal band, and growing prize-winning leeks on her allotment. She enjoyed her job a great deal, but it was the things she did outside of it which gave her life meaning, even though they had no financial reward. So in effect, her job is how she funds these other activities. The project's questions are deliberately ambiguous to encourage the reader to interpret them in their own way, which then leads to unexpected and revealing lines of inquiry. Its aim is to consider the value we place on the activity we perform every day and to challenge our current understandings of work. The majority of the responses to the first question, what did you want to be when you were growing up, were what I would have expected, things like dinosaurs or space. But there are also more emotive answers like not fat or someone else. Reactions to what gets you out of bed in the morning were largely pragmatic, like needing the toilet or something to eat. But few people mentioned work. Other obligations like caring for children or pets were seen as a bigger priority. The most interesting responses were to the last question, what would you do if you had a year off? This is because the audience were required to use their imagination. A lot of people asked what did I mean by a year off? Would it be paid or unpaid? Any clarification would lead to more questions, so I invited them to define it for themselves. Some saw it as an opportunity to escape from their daily responsibilities or having to spend time with their family. But not everyone saw it as a positive thing. One person told me how they'd been made redundant, so they did have a year off, but it had been imposed on them, and this felt like a burden instead of an escape. These explanations were far more revealing than the initial answers, and that is why it was so important that I was present in the space during the exhibition in order to have these conversations with the people about their responses. Once I talked to them for a short time, I was able to introduce the idea of basic income, connecting it to our conversation and their life experiences. This allowed us to talk about the subject without having to come to any clear-cut conclusions, either for or against. The project's aim is not to convert members of the public to be supporters of basic income, but to convey information about the policy to them and to encourage a deeper debate that avoids knee-jerk reactions or ideological blockages. It is also an opportunity for me, as an advocate, to learn about their views and wider beliefs. In conclusion, what are the advantages of using art projects like this to communicate the idea of basic income? Open-ended questions can lead to unexpected answers and an opportunity for both sides of the debate to learn from each other. The format encourages people who would not normally take part in a political discussion to interact with the idea of basic income. The project is deliberately playful, which means that it can tackle serious or sensitive subject matter in a relaxed and convivial way. The project may not achieve immediate results, but public opinion does not change overnight. It needs time to develop, and getting basic income into the public imagination is the first step. To finish, I would like to quote the response the artist and activist Jonathan Barnbrook gave when he was asked what effect his work has on society. It's complex. You don't expect people to suddenly change their opinion. I think all you can hope for is that you are one of many voices that does get something onto the agenda. I'm sorry I can't be with you today to answer any questions, but please get in touch if you have any, or if you'd like to tell me your answers to the project's 3 questions. Thank you.